The rain clinked rhythmically against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my mother's estate, a sprawling, sea-blown property tucked along the rugged cliffs of Carmel by the Sea, California. Outside, waves pounded the rocks with relentless rhythm, but the real storm was here in the echoing chill of the marble-floored dining room. "Congratulations, Derek," my mother, Maggie Rowe, said with poised delight, her red-tipped fingers pushing a thick, cream-colored envelope across the glass table toward my younger half-brother. "You've earned this, every bit of it." Inside that envelope was the empire. Deed to the estate controlling interest in the family foundation, the trust fund all tied up in ribboned legality with his name on it. I sat across from them, 36 years old, and suddenly swallowed up by the old familiar silence of invisibility. The child they always saw as too delicate, too abstract. My fingers twitched under the table, curling into quiet fists against the fine linen of my slacks. Derek wouldn't meet my eyes. He kept his gaze on the envelope like it might evaporate if he blinked. Rick Wallace. My stepfather swirled his vintage Pinot Noir lazily, lips pressed into a crooked, knowing smirk. Then Maggie turned toward me, her voice cool and surgical. "And you, Elena, she said you've always been too sensitive, too dreamy. You were never built for this world." The slap in her words hit harder than I anticipated. There were 5 of us in that room: Maggie, Derek, Rick, our attorney Gerald Lancaster, and me. But never had I felt more exiled. Maggie motioned toward Gerald, the man in the dark blue suit with silver temples and piercing eyes. "Let's finish this, Gerald." I leaned in, voice barely a whisper. "Mom, don't do this." She scoffed without hesitation. "You made your choice, Elena. You left Rowe Global to go teach in the mountains of Bolivia, or wherever it was. You traded corporate boards for mosquito nets. What did that get you? Some charity photos and bug bites. You never asked why I said my voice steadier now, not once." "Because it didn't matter," she snapped. "Derek stayed. Derek showed he was loyal." "No," I said with calm clarity, "he played the part you needed. And you needed it badly." She rolled her eyes like she was tired of pretending to care. That's when Gerald cleared his throat and raised a hand slightly. "Actually," he said, "before we proceed, there's something you all need to be aware of." Maggie blinked, thrown off. "What is it?" Gerald opened his black leather folder with slow precision. "A clause. Your late father, Edward Rowe Sr., inserted it discreetly. But it's legally binding." He looked Maggie directly in the eye. "It's a sealed amendment to the trust added 7 years ago at his personal request." My chest tightened at the mention of Grandpa Ed. He had been the only one who ever believed in me, not in a performative way, but quietly, deeply. He told me once that silence can hold more power than the loudest voices. "What amendment?" Maggie's tone turned sharp defensive. Gerald slid a yellowed document from his folder. "This was notarized during Mr. Rowe's final months. His instructions were specific. It was to remain sealed unless an attempt was made to cut Elena from the succession line." Her mask cracked. "He didn't have that kind of authority." "He did," Gerald replied, steady as stone. "He maintained 52% controlling interest in the Rowe Trust until his death. That majority gave him the right to establish directives that override any recent changes." Derek sat up straighter. Rick froze mid-sip, his wine glass, suspended between thought and speech. Gerald then turned to me. "Miss Rowe, would you prefer to read it, or shall I?" My eyes didn't move from Derek's envelope, the same one intended to delete me from existence. "Please," I said, voice low. "You read it." He unfolded the document slowly, reverently. "Should my granddaughter, Elena Rowe, ever be deemed unfit or excluded by her immediate family, I hereby grant her full governance and voting authority over my shares of the Rowe Family Trust and its subsidiaries. This directive takes immediate effect and overrides all prior stipulations." Gerald paused, then added, "Additionally, no alterations to the estate's ownership or governance may occur without her written consent." Silence, heavy and absolute. Even the waves seemed to hush. "What the hell is this supposed to mean?" Maggie barked. Gerald didn't flinch. He turned to her, then to me. "It means your daughter Elena is now the majority controller of the trust. Anything signed here today has no legal standing without her consent." Maggie jolted to her feet, the legs of her chair scraping harshly against the marble. "She's not prepared. She doesn't know balance sheets from garden mulch." "Maybe not the way you do," I said, rising to meet her glare. but I've led projects, built systems, supported communities. I've built things that lasted. That mattered. I looked at Gerald and nodded. Let's continue. We have work to do. Derek's fingers gripped the envelope tighter. Rick suddenly found the window very interesting. Maggie didn't sit. She stayed frozen, a monument to disbelief as the balance of power tipped away from her for the first time. Her silence said more than any outburst could. And in her eyes I saw something I'd never seen before: fear. Not fear of me, but of losing control. I softened. You can sit, Mom. This isn't revenge, I just wanted a voice, a seat at the table. She stayed standing. Then Derek burst. This is insane, Elena left. She went off to build tiny houses or whatever in the jungle. I built safe housing for women escaping violence, I replied. Helped veterans rebuild their lives. I didn't abandon this family, I pursued something bigger than its narrow expectations. He scoffed, touching. But that's not how you run Row Global. Maybe not, I said, a quiet smile playing on my lips. But it's how you restore its soul. If you felt it, that seismic shift when the tides of power reversed and rushed back to the one they thought they'd erased, then remember, not all victories are loud. Some come quietly, cloaked in grace and truth. And if this moment stirs something deep within you, then follow along, because what comes next isn't just a fight for legacy, it's a challenge to everything this family ever claimed to control. I turned to Derek, meeting his calculating gaze with steady resolve. I know I said with the quiet steel of someone done being dismissed that you've been funneling funds through a shell consulting firm in Nevada, owned by your old frat brother, if I'm not mistaken. His complexion lost its color in an instant. The blood drained from his face so fast it looked like he'd seen a ghost. Across the room, Maggie sucked in a breath like she'd been slapped. Elena, stop this, she snapped, her voice a jagged whisper. This is family. But I couldn't hold it in. My voice cracked raw with years of betrayal. Was it family, I asked, staring her down, when you stood there and let them cut me out? When you celebrated Derek for simply staying while ignoring every sacrifice I made, just to keep breathing under the weight of your expectations? Maggie's gaze dropped, shadowed by the very shame she would never admit. You never belonged in this world, she murmured, each word brittle, crumbling. No, I said with a nod that acknowledged the finality of her belief. You made that perfectly clear. But Grandpa Ed, he believed something different. Gerald cleared his throat gently, grounding the moment back in law and legacy. Miss Rowe, he said, your grandfather left you more than just voting rights. He also left behind something personal, something he instructed to be opened at this very moment. He reached into his briefcase and retrieved a weathered leather box, the kind that seemed to hum with memory. Inside lay a golden compass, tarnished at the edges, well-loved, and beneath it a folded letter bearing my name in grandfather's graceful looping script. My fingers trembled as I lifted it, the paper whispering against my skin as I unfolded it. My dearest Elena, if you are holding this, then your mother has done what I feared she might. Do not hate her. She was shaped by a world that taught her control was love. But you, my dear, were always different: quiet strength, steady vision. You are the compass. Trust your path and others will follow. Grandfather. Tears gathered at the edges of my lashes, warm and waiting, but I held them back. I folded the letter, tucked it beside the compass, and lifted my chin. Let's proceed, I said. As I signed the document that affirmed my control over the family trust, Maggie's voice sliced through the quiet. You think this makes you powerful? She asked, her tone a bitter rasp. You think he gave you this out of love, no, Elena. It was to spite me. I didn't flinch. I looked at her not as a daughter hungry for scraps of approval, but as a woman standing on her own ground. No, I said calmly. He gave it to me because he believed I would build something that lasts. And with that, I turned and walked away, the weight of 3 decades of rejection crumbling behind me like old stone. But peace didn't wait at the end of that marble corridor. No war did coiled and ready, because power, when taken from those who misuse it, never retreats quietly. I had barely crossed the threshold when I heard footsteps quicken behind me. Elena, Derek called. I turned. His voice was casual, but his eyes, they were cold and calculating. You don't have to do this, he said. Do what I asked. Cut me out. That's what you're planning, right? I haven't made any moves, I said, keeping my voice even. I simply stood up. He smirked, a thin, cynical thing. You think signing some papers makes you a leader? You don't have the stomach for this. My heart thudded, but I didn't let him see it. I'm not here to prove myself to you, I replied. I'm here to lead with purpose, something this family forgot a long time ago. He stepped closer, voice dropping like venom. 2 months, he whispered. You'll crawl back. This isn't a school project, Elena. It's a battlefield. No, I whispered back, it's a platform, and I'll use it to elevate, not dominate. He turned sharply and walked away, but his clenched fists said what he wouldn't. He hadn't been defeated, he was regrouping. And in the days that followed, the proof came fast and silent. Whispers echoed through the hallways like old ghosts. Elena Rowe was back, and this time not as a visitor. To some, I was hope reborn. To others, a reckoning. I didn't fire anyone, didn't call for sweeping changes. Instead, I listened. And what I heard chilled me. Departments sabotaging one another, promotions handed out not for merit, but obedience. Fatigue treated like weakness. This wasn't a company, it was a kingdom. And Derek had ruled it through chaos. One afternoon, I stepped into the break room. The hum of conversation died instantly. Please, I said, raising a gentle hand, you're on break. Sit. Eat. A custodian, Linda Reyes, slowly rose from her chair, her expression wary. We weren't allowed to sit if Mr. Derek walked in. I paused, letting the injustice settle over me. That changes today, I said simply. Something shifted in her face, years of tension softening just slightly. She sat again, and this time so did the others. That night I stayed long after the lights dimmed and the halls emptied. Beneath the glare of fluorescent lights, I went digging. And in the digital debris Derek left behind, I found rot. 3 unexplained budget discrepancies, 1 illegal contract with a ghost vendor, 6 terminated employees, all of them whistleblowers. This wasn't carelessness, this was decay. And if I didn't act fast, I wouldn't just inherit a disaster, I'd be branded its architect. The next morning, Derek burst into my office, his face a blend of rage and smug confidence. He slammed a thick folder on my desk. So you want the CEO seat, he hissed. Let's see how long you last. I flipped through the contents, emails, spreadsheets, even photos, all forged. These are fake, I said, voice flat. He smirked. Can you prove it? I looked up, locking eyes with him. You're really willing to burn everything down just to take me with it. I want what's mine, he said, venom in his tone. You were never supposed to be here. I stood rooted in something deeper than fear. I don't want your throne, Derek. I want to heal what you broke. He sneered. You see healing, I see weakness. Then he left, sure I would crumble under the pressure. But that was the moment I realized this wasn't about rivalry. It was war. But I possessed something Derek did not, a quiet, unshakable ally called the truth. Still the truth, though solid, could not brace against the gale force winds of public opinion. Within 48 hours, headlines crashed through the media landscape like sledgehammers against glass. New CEO implicated in charity fund misuse. Power struggle rocks Rowe Global. Elena Rowe, unqualified heiress or silent saboteur. Facts didn't matter. The narrative had been loosed, and the internet fed on perception, not evidence. My inbox pulsed with 1,000 panicked voices, each subject line a flare of fear. Investors recoiled. My phone was a siren in my hand, vibrating with a fury that mirrored the tremor in my heart. I'd barely stepped into this storm, and already I was drowning in doubt, the story slipping from my grasp. I told myself to breathe, to remember that the truth, however slow, was a steady horse in the race. But that night, as I curled on the leather couch in my dim office, the city lights casting broken lines across the floor, I finally cracked. Not in fury, not with dramatic sobs, just a quiet, unraveling tears soaking into my sleeve, silent and deep. Not because I feared they believed the lies, but because for a flicker of a moment I did. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe Grandpa Ed had been wrong. A soft knock splintered the silence. I straightened quickly, swiping at my cheeks. Come in. The door creaked open, and Linda Reyes stepped in, holding a paper cup of tea like an offering. Thought you might need this, she said, her voice low, honest. You didn't have to, I whispered. She sank into the seat beside me. You looked like you did. No one ever brought me anything when I cried in this room, she added with a small, bitter smile. Maybe it's time someone broke that cycle. Her words, so simple, pierced straight through the armor I'd been piecing together all day. Thank you, I murmured. She studied me, her eyes unwavering. Miss Elena, do you want to know the truth about your family? I hesitated, then nodded. I've worked here 28 years. I've seen everything they tried to hide. I said nothing throat tight. You always looked people in the eye. That's why I believe in you. I asked, voice nearly gone, why help me? Her smile was soft. Because someone once helped me when no one else did. And because this company doesn't need another king, it needs a healer. The next morning, I walked into the boardroom with a calm earned not from confidence but from clarity. The room was already full, polished shoes, sharp tongues, and suits stiffer than the truth. They began speaking before I even sat. Accusations flew the air thick with doubt. One man, red-faced with entitlement, even threatened legal action if I didn't step aside. When the noise quieted, I stood. "If anyone here can prove those documents are authentic," I said, voice ringing like a bell in winter air, "I will resign right now." Silence followed. I placed a stack of original records on the table, financial trails, audit logs, buried payments, all marked with Derek's signature chaos. Then I clicked the remote. A projector buzzed to life, casting footage across the screen. Derek entering the finance wing after hours, accessing a locked terminal, inserting a USB drive. The timestamp aligned perfectly with the fabricated documents. "Truth matters," I said softly. But I didn't come to destroy my brother. I came to rebuild what he dismantled. I turned to legal. My grandfather didn't choose me because I was perfect. He chose me because I still believe that people can change, even the ones who hurt us. I paused. "I won't press charges, but Derek is suspended pending a full internal investigation." A silence deeper than judgment followed. Walter Green, once dismissive, stood slowly. His voice was gravel and regret. "I misjudged you. Thought you were too soft. But you reminded me what this company was meant to be, about people, not power." The mood shifted. Not cheers, not applause, just the solemn exhale of recognition. Derek never came back. But 2 days later, a hand-addressed envelope waited on my desk. "Elena, I don't expect forgiveness. I didn't just want the company. I wanted to be seen. You always got the love. I thought I never did. Maybe you just earned it differently." "Derek?" I folded the note gently and placed it beside Grandpa's compass. "Some wars don't end with thunder. Some end in the hush of a closed door and the quiet grace of not retaliating." The office felt different now, not muted but alive, present. A month passed. The press recanted. Some called it luck, but those who mattered knew better. It wasn't luck. It was conviction. It was staying upright when everything screamed to fall. One voice remained missing. My mother's. No calls, no lawsuits, just silence, the kind you learn not to trust. Until one Sunday afternoon, I stepped into my office, and there she was. No lipstick, no armor, just a woman weathered and spent. "I had to see it," she said. "See what? That you didn't burn it all down." I said nothing. She looked older than memory, smaller, like her fight had finally walked away. "You were right," she whispered, "about Derek, about me, about what we forgot." I held the quiet. She reached into her bag and handed me a photo. Me and Grandpa. I was 12, speckled in paint. He was laughing. "He said you'd change everything." I didn't want to believe it. If I did, I said it's because he believed in me. She nodded. "I came to say something I should have said years ago. I'm sorry, Elena, for everything." For the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt still. "Healing doesn't start with blame," I said. "It starts when someone chooses to break the cycle." She nodded again. I just needed to say it before I ran out of time. "Then don't," I replied. "Fix what you can. It's not too late." She gave me one long look and left. 2 weeks later, Linda stepped in with a worn folder. "What's this?" I asked. "A list of everyone your mother pushed out for speaking up. Figured you'd want to know." I read every name. Then we sent out letters, not apologies, just invitations. Come back. No explanations needed. Because legacy isn't blood, it's how people feel when you're gone. Months passed. Row Global didn't get flashier, but it got warmer. Derek stayed away. But we had coffee once, no apologies, just a quiet truce. That was enough. Maggie stayed distant. But one afternoon I received a donation receipt from Haven Builders. Large. In my name. No card. Just her way of saying she was trying. And that was enough. Because I hadn't chased revenge. I'd earned something deeper: peace, respect, a future beyond the reach of the past. Now when I enter the boardroom, there are no whispers, only footsteps. People walking with me, not behind me. Because once someone said I was nothing, and I proved them wrong without becoming them. If my journey sparked something in you, leave a comment and let me know what stayed with you. And if you're walking your own quiet road back to strength, subscribe and like this video. It helps more voices like ours rise. Because the world doesn't just need power, it needs truth, and it needs you.